do you think it's at all possible that rather than knowing nothing and seeing nothing and feeling nothing of the world, that the infinite or God or whatever word you want to use knows everything and experiences everything in a way that maybe we can't understand? And so I guess as an analogy, you know, if I turn my head, there are cells, muscles that are doing things that I don't understand, but I am having an experience of it and I am involved in it. And is it possible that we, as part of the infinite, are part of something that we just cannot understand?
Absolutely. If by we, when you say if we are part of the infinite, then what you're referring to then is the finite mind. You
Yes.
could say that each of our finite minds is part of infinite consciousness, and you're absolutely right. The finite mind cannot comprehend the infinite, precisely because it's finite. It's the two analogies I often use. You can't see white snow through orange-tinted glasses, because everything you look at through orange-tinted glasses is, by definition, tinted orange. So although you're looking at white snow, it appears to you orange, not because it is orange, but because of the limitations of the medium through which you look. Our mind is the orange-tinted glasses. It's made of thinking and perceiving. And it tints everything it knows with the limitations of thought and perception. So what we're looking at now is infinite being. It doesn't look like it, but it is. Why? Because that's all there is in reality, is infinite aware being. But when the finite mind looks at the infinite, it perceives it in a way that is consistent with its own limitations. So when we look at the infinite, we see a world. There's no world out there. At least there's no world as it is normally conceived by thought. There's a reality out there, although of course reality is not out there, it's only out there in relationship to a finite mind that seems to be in here. But let's call it out there. There is something real about the world, but it's not what it appears to be. Remember Wordsworth, we half create and half perceive the world. He uses the word perceive in a different way than I do. So, in other words, what we perceive as the world is the conjunction of infinite consciousness meeting the finite mind. The world borrows its reality, or it owes its reality to infinite consciousness, but it borrows its appearance and therefore its limitations from the finite mind. So what we see as the world is an interaction between the infinite and the finite, and that appears as the world. So you're right. The finite mind, by definition, cannot know reality. Although everything that experiences is that reality, it cannot know that reality as it is. It can only know it as it appears to itself. Now, that would be hopeless if the only experience we had was known through the finite mind. If all we knew was the experience of thinking and perceiving, then we would not be able to know the nature of reality. But there is one experience that we have that is not mediated through the finite mind, the awareness of being. All other awareness experiences through the agency of the finite mind, but its experience of itself is direct. It's direct knowledge, not indirect through the mind. So our only access to the nature of reality is the experience of the awareness of being. It's the only experience there is that is not mediated through the mind. The other analogy I often use. And John Smith, the actor John Smith, who plays the part of King Lear cannot know John Smith, although he is John Smith. But as King Lear, he cannot know John Smith because everything he knows is filtered through the character of King Lear and appears in accordance with its limitations. So yes, you're right. The finite mind cannot know the nature of reality. But there is one experience we have that is not subject to the limitations of the finite mind, the awareness of being. And it is through that experience that we have direct access to reality. That's the only experience there is through which we have direct access to reality, as it essentially is rather than as it appears.
I guess I was wondering though about the infinite, not the inverse of that. So not the finite mind's inability to perceive the infinite, but the infinite's apparent inability to experience the finite world.
But from what point of view would it experience the finite world? Let's say, from what point of view, for instance, would the infinite view this jug?
So presumably from all of ours, and I assume that it's dimensionless, right? So it would be through space and time.
But if the infinite perceived this drug from all possible points of view in space simultaneously, it would not look like a jug.
Right, I guess what I mean is it possible that there is some other experience that we with our finite minds can't understand, but that...
Yes, that it is possible and very likely that there are other kinds of mind in reality. A human mind is just a mind that consists of thinking and perceiving. But to suggest that thinking and perceiving, or thinking, perceiving, well, one word, thinking, perceiving, is the only kind of mind there is the arrogance of a human mind. There may be all kinds of other minds in reality that are not configured in the form of thinking and perceiving, but are configured in the form of Xing and Ying. We cannot imagine what that would be.
Yeah.
And moreover, those minds may be present here, but our impoverished faculties of thought and perception simply cannot perceive them.
Yeah.
So it's not that those minds are in some other realm.
Yeah.
They could be present here, but we just simply, but because we view reality through the narrow slit of that sense perception, we just don't register them. So it's highly likely, I think it's highly likely that there are other kinds of... I mean, we know that there are the dolphins and dogs and whales and bats perceive things that we don't perceive. Why? Because their minds are not configured the way our minds are configured. Well, we pick up, we can register dogs and bats and dolphins and whales because they are... We pick up that aspect of that entity that our sense perceptions are able to register. But we only pick up as much as our sense perceptions can register. Remember William Blake, every bird that cuts the airy way, every bird that flies through the sky is an immense world of delight, enclosed by sense perception. So it's our sense perceptions that enclose what's really there and make it appear as a bird. But what's there is infinitely larger. He calls it an immense world of delight. Every bird that cuts the airy way is an immense world of delight, enclosed by our sense perceptions and made to look like a bird. So I think, yes, sorry, taking a long time to respond to your question. I would think it's highly likely there are different kinds of minds, and those different kinds of minds will experience reality in a way that is very different from the way that we experience it. But the infinite, I would stay with my statement that the infinite by itself directly has no objective experience. I want to try and make it more clear to you why that's the case. In order to perceive something, we must stand apart from that thing. You put your finger like this, Christopher. Yeah, you can perceive your finger because your finger is at a distance from that which perceives. And for the sake of this experiment, let's just say your eyes are perceiving your finger. Yeah, you can see your finger because your finger is at a distance from your eyes. Now bring your finger closer. Close. You can still perceive it when it's here because it's still at a distance from your eyes. Now, when your finger touches your eye, what happens to it?
I'm going to poke it. No, I can't see it.
You can't see it.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're not standing apart. There's no distance between the eye and the finger. That's why the eyes cannot perceive themselves.
Yeah.
You can only perceive something that you stand apart from. You can only know something, similarly, that you stand apart from. I know such and such. So all knowledge and experience take place in subject-object relationship. But when the eyes try to see themselves, they don't see anything because they can't stand apart in subject-object relationship. Likewise, when the knower, that which knows objective knowledge, looks at itself, it can't stand, in other words, awareness. When awareness looks at itself, it can't stand apart from itself and look back at itself and know itself in subject-object experience. So there's no objective experience in awareness's knowledge of itself, because for there to be objective experience, there has to be a separate subject. So that is why awareness's experience of itself is what the mind calls empty, void. There's nothing there. Now, take reality. Just imagine that reality is vast. It's not vast, it's dimensionless. But to take infinite reality, but it's by definition, it's infinite, it's boundless, it's borderless. In order for infinite reality to know, either to know itself objectively, or indeed to know anything else, it would have to stand apart. Take reality's knowledge of itself, take the infinite's knowledge of itself. In order to know itself as an object, it would have to stand apart from itself. But where would it go? Where would the infinite go in order to look back at itself? There's nowhere where it could go. So when the infinite looks at itself, it sees nothing. It knows the experience of being. It knows it has the experience of being. Because being is what it is, aware being is what it is, but there's no objective experience there. And in order to know an object, it would have to stand, whatever the object, it would have to stand apart from that object as a separate subject. But where would it stand? The only way it could know an object is by localizing itself as a subject. And it's not that the object is there and that it sees the object when it becomes a subject. It's that it simultaneously divides itself into subject and object. There's no object there without the subject that perceives it. So it divides it. And this is exactly what happens to your mind when it falls asleep at night. Your mind, which is a mini field of consciousness, a mini homogeneous field of consciousness, divides itself in two when you have a dream. Simultaneously, your mind appears as the dreamed world, the streets of Paris, and you then become a separate subject of experience. You localize yourself on the streets of Paris. You don't see the streets of Paris from your bed in the Mercy Center. You view them from the point of view of the person you seem to become within your own dream. So our mind does this every night. It divides, or seems to divide itself in two. That's the only way it can know the dreamed world. Well, just go up one level. That's what consciousness is doing, dreaming the universe within itself and simultaneously localizing itself as each of our minds, from whose perspective it sees itself as the universe. It only has finite experience from the point of view of a finite mind. And this is why, in the highest teachings, they say that for reality, which is all that there truly is, there is no creation. There is no appearance. It's called Ajātivāda. There is no creation, no destruction, no existence, no appearance, because that's how things are for reality. And if reality is all there truly is, then the very, very, very highest teachings say that there is no creation, there is no destruction, there is nothing. Nothing exists. That's too radical for most people, so that teachings come down one step off the top of the mountain and speak at a lower level, because at that level there's no teaching, there's nothing to say, there's no one to say it to, there's no. So you only come across these teachings in the Mandukya Upanishad and Gaudapada and Shankaracharya and Ramana Maharshi and a few others. Most teachings make more of a concession. They just come down one step off the top of the mountain out of compassion for us. Sorry, that was a rather long-winded answer to your question. I hope that somewhere in there there's a response to your question.
Yes, there was. Then, yeah, thank you. That was beautiful, and thank you again for your efforts, time and time again, to try to help us to understand these things. Thank you.